Michael Khambatta, and I am the Geneva representative for the Gulf Center for Human Rights. We document violations of the freedoms of expression, association, and assembly, and especially as they pertain to human rights defenders in the widest sense, be they journalists, activists, lawyers, and others. We've been issuing reports on Yemen every 2 months, summarizing individual cases. The last is in January. Thank you all for taking time to attend this event. It is getting busier and busier up in room 20. This is one of the few times where Yemen will be addressed at the Human Rights Council this session. With the failure in 2021 to renew the mandate of the Group of Eminent Experts, an entire mechanism that collected information on violations and then reported to the Council disappeared off the Council's agenda. From 2017 until 2021, the Group of Eminent Experts was an internationally mandated body documenting human rights abuses that occurred since 2014. This was a huge loss for accountability. The reason we're holding this event is that we're hoping it is one step on the road back towards international accountability. During this event, we have a video presentation in Arabic with English subtitles from the Yemeni Teachers Network who have been on strike as they cannot live on their salaries. We will also hear from 2 Yemeni activists, one inside Yemen who will speak live online, and one colleague next to me who will speak on the documentation of violations. The Cairo Institute to my right will then summarize the options that exist at the Council that could put us on the track towards accountability. I want to thank the state co-sponsors in alphabetical order, Belgium, Canada, Ireland, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands. They were involved in the core group mandating the GEE, and we're happy to see their continued support. I want to take this moment to talk about what it takes for a Yemeni activist to come to Geneva and why we did not even try this time. To apply for a Swiss visa, a Yemeni needs to travel to Amman to apply, then wait 1 to 2 weeks for a decision. This involves either 2 flights or 2 expensive flights or 1 with weeks of accommodation. Only then can the travel costs of travel to Switzerland be factored in. Anecdotally, Switzerland's visa policies are becoming more restrictive. Even when trips are approved, they can be very short, and this provides an advocacy restraint. Given the financial constraints, we did not even try. We're very happy to have the Yemeni archive online who will speak after the video. And now if I can ask for the video to be played. Thank you.
جميل ناجي أحمد اليمن اتحاد التربويين اليمنيين تعز اللجنة الإعلامية إلى مجلس حقوق الإنسان والمجتمع الدولي وكتم علما بأن المعلمين والمعلمات والتربويين اليمنيين يعانون من مشاكل عدة أهمها انعدام الأمن الغذائي والمقصود هنا ليس الوجبة الغذائية الكاملة وإنما وجبة الفقراء حتى وجبة الفقراء أصبحت منعدمة لدى المعلم. أيضا انعدام الأمن الصحي. المعلم اليمني والمعلمة اليمنية والتربوي اليمني يعاني من الانعدام التام في التأمين الصحي لعدم قدرة المعلم على الإنفاق على التعليم الصحي، وهذا أدى إلى وفاة العديد من المعلمين بسبب فقرهم. كذلك المعلم اليمني والتربوي اليمني يعاني من انعدام الأمن الخدمي كهرباء ومياه وغيرها. أيضا انعدام الأمن التعليمي. المعلم اليمني يتخرج في الوقت الذي يتخرج على يديه الكثير من الدكاترة والصيادلة وغيرهم، إلا أن أولاد المعلمين وأبناء المعلمين والتربويين كثيرا غالبا ما يحرمون من الدراسة بسبب عدم القدرة على الإنفاق الدراسي من قبل المعلم والتربوي على أولادهم وأبنائهم. والسبب يعود إلى الوضع المعيشي المزري الذي يعيشه المعلم بسبب ارتفاع الأسعار في السلع الغذائية الأساسية والاستهلاكية. 2 أو ارتفاع قيمة العملات الأجنبية. العملات الأجنبية ترتفع بشكل جنوني بين ليلة وضحاها. يقابله ارتفاع السلع الأساسية الذاتية والغذائية، كذلك انخفاض مخيف في قيمة العملة الوطنية، وهذا انخفاض في قيمة العملة الوطنية والذي وصل حتى أن راتب المعلم وصل إلى أقل من 50 دولار، وأصبح المعلم ينام على سعة ويصحو على سعة، وراتبه يقل بين ليلة وضحاها. وهو الأمر الذي جعل المعلم يخرج للمطالبة بحقوقه المشروعة وتفعيل المسيرات وتفعيل المسيرات حتى وتفعيل المسيرات، وكذلك الفعاليات الأخرى التفعيلية المكفولة في الدستور والقانون. إلا أن السلطة والجهات المعنية تعاملت معنا بسخرية واستخفاف حتى وصل حال المعلم إلى الحال الذي لا يطاق. وهنا والآن نحن في الشهر الثالث من الإضراب وتفعيل المسيرات، والسلطة لم تستجيب لنا. ومن هنا نناشد المجتمع الدولي وبقية حقوق الإنسان بأن يضغطوا على المجلس الرئاسي وحكومته بتنفيذ مطالبنا، وكذلك إلزام التحالف كونه ملزم بتحسين رواتبنا ومعيشتنا وحالنا وفق البند السابع. تحياتي جميع الشجع اللجنة الإعلامية لاتحاد التربويين اليمنيين تعز.
I think that sets the stage for the current situation when you see teachers having to go on strike and have been on strike for 3 months in order just to have a living wage. And by living wage in Yemen, we do not mean anything particularly luxurious. So this gives an indication of what the wider situation is. Now, to drill down into the actual human rights violations, I'm going to pass the floor to Bonyan Gamal, who is online. She is one of the advocacy leads for the Yemeni archive, who document human rights violations and have done so for years. Bonyan.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Michael. And this is a very good opportunity to thank you and the Gulf Center, Cairo Institute, and the presenting and the countries and organizations sponsoring this event as well. My name is Bonyan Gamal. I am a lawyer based in Sana'a, and I am the program manager for the Yemeni Archive. The Yemeni Archive is an organization that documents human rights violations through open source research, and that works also towards accountability and on advocacy. I'd like to also extend my respect and thanks to Mr. Jamil Shuja, who presented the situation of Yemeni teachers who are one of the sectors of Yemeni society who are facing great economical risks. who presented it with great authenticity and strength. And today, I would like to speak about how the war affects civilians throughout time. In our case, it's a decade, or more than a decade of time. I speak to you today from a city that suffered for more than 10 years of continued war and escalating violence. What I saw from Sana'a and from the rest of Yemen is not just a war, it was a systematic destruction of Yemen civilian population. We saw humans losing their lives in all ways, losing their security, their psychological well-being, their livelihood, and their country. I will try today to give you an overview of the patterns of violations that were documented by the Yemeni archive and by also other organizations. I will try to focus on the economical situation that is happening due to the war. And from our opinion at the Yemeni archive, the suggested course of action and advocacy calls. Since 2018, we at the Yemeni archive have been documenting and archiving several patterns of violations, including indiscriminate airstrikes and shelling, detention and torture, as well as blockades and restrictions that until now still continue to be afflicted on the Yemeni people since 2014. We have archived hundreds of indiscriminate airstrikes and shelling that have devastated densely populated areas like Sa'da, Hudayda, Ta'az. It was by several perpetrators, including Houthis, Ansar Allah group, Saudi and UAE-led coalition, and in the last year, the Israeli Defense Forces. Enforced disappearances and torture also persist. Since May 2024, Houthi Ansar Allah forces have detained UN and civil society staff in Sana'a. There was also another wave in the past 2 months of detention that detained more than 20 civil society staff and UN. We documented in September another wave of arrests that targeted journalists and activists that were commemorating the September 26th Yemeni revolution, with at least 31 civilians still missing based on the latest published investigation. Also, attacks in the south on civil society still continue by the Southern Transitional Council, including attacks on their offices and denying their permits. Our latest investigation covered the attack on Yemen Women Union by the Southern Transitional Council. And today, which I think needs an urgent and strong action, objects that are indispensable for civilian survival are being targeted with no accountability and are kept in the dark. In the past years, we documented around 611 attacks on civilian infrastructure, including markets, oil and gas infrastructure, water infrastructure, and electric infrastructure, 41% of which caused immediate civilian casualties. And also beyond Houthi-imposed restrictions on aid and civil society, Israeli airstrikes backed by US and UK coalition have repeatedly hit Al-Hudayda port in Sana'a and Sana'a airport. Also, both power stations in Sana'a and Al-Hudayda were targeted, cutting off Yemen's critical lifelines. For several years in all areas in Yemen, the economic situation for individuals has been drastically targeted. As we heard from the teachers' union, it has come clear that families are finding it harder to stay alive due to direct attack against human beings' livelihood in all Yemen. And for that, the Human Rights Council, the international community must demand an immediate end to illegal airstrikes that are targeting vital infrastructure and hold accountable these perpetrators. And also the direct attacks against civil society and pushing towards the release of our colleagues and friends who are still detained in Sana'a and in different governorates by Houthi Ansar Allah, and also all the civilians that are disappeared and tortured in prisons of all parties to the Yemeni conflict for the past years. For the international accountability, Yemeni civil society has been pushing for accountability, for inclusive accountability that is easy to be reached for Yemeni civilians who have been under several patterns of violations throughout 10 and more years. I believe that inclusive, reachable, and international criminal accountability is the way to go forward for a long-lasting peace for Yemen. And looking at the past context and what happened in the past months, it is also important for a lasting peace for the region. And as time moves, as I continue watching the impact of that time, my belief strengthens that the answer lies in accountability. It is, in my opinion, impunity that is allowing all these national, regional, and international perpetrators to continue with the escalating violence in Yemen. Yemeni civil society has repeatedly called for action, yet instead of strengthening accountability, the Human Rights Council disbanded the Group of Eminent Experts, which was the only mechanism that was international and documenting human rights violation. That was a move that weakened efforts to investigate perpetrators and document violations. I think that the Council must reverse this course, empower independent investigations, and uphold justice for Yemeni civilians. And for that, I call for states in and outside of the Human Rights Council to champion for the establishment of a new, transparent, and independent international criminal accountability mechanism for Yemen, and for urgent and decisive action to de-escalate the political and security crisis. I think Yemen needs very important international attention now, and in order to push and gain momentum for the peace process. The escalating events of 2024 have deepened civilian suffering, yet, and unfortunately, the international support has dwindled. Despite the worsening conditions, many countries and international organizations are scaling back on humanitarian aid and abandoning efforts to strengthen accountability at the Human Rights Council. This inaction only prolongs the Yemeni crisis. Yemeni civil society is the most important front line against extremist ideology and against armed groups, but it has become a struggle for almost all of the local Yemeni civil society to find funding opportunities, risking the absence of civil activity in Yemen, and by result, strengthening extremist armed groups. For that, international community must strengthen coordinated support for life-saving humanitarian aid, ensuring that it reaches Yemen's most vulnerable populations, and support the continuation of Yemen civil society organizations working in Yemen including support for documentation of current and previous human rights violations. As a conclusion, I would like to recall the main three advocacy calls for the Yemeni archive, which is the end of illegal airstrikes and enforced disappearances of Yemeni civil society, and an international accountability mechanism that has to be established to ensure the de-escalation of violence and the pursuit of sustainable peace. And urgent action is needed to ease Yemen's humanitarian and economic crisis. Thank you again. Thank you for listening, and have a nice day.
Thank you, Bonyan, for your powerful statements and an excellent outline of the current situation and the challenges that remain. I'm now going to. I hope you can stay with us for any questions that might come later on. I'm now going to move to Tawfik Alhamidi, who is to my left. He's the president of SAM, Organization for Rights and Liberties. It's an organization with staff and members in Yemen, but also in Europe. He will speak in Arabic. I'll pass the floor to you. Please. Thank you, Tawfik.
بداية المعذرة، ربما أصبت بوعكة برد لكن سأحاول. أولا في البداية نود أن أتقدم بالشكر الجزيل لمركز الخليج لحقوق الإنسان ومركز القاهرة أيضا لتنظيم هذا الحدث المهم، والذي يجسد في حقيقة الأمر اهتمام خاص بالملف اليمني، ويؤكد على استمرار الجهود الدولية والمحلية من أجل تعزيز المواجهة أو تعزيز المساءلة والحد من الإفلات من العقاب. كما أود أن أشكر كافة الحاضرين ممثلي الدول في هذه القاعة، والذي يشرفني أن أقدم إحاطة ربما ستحمل عنوان لماذا بعد 10 سنوات من القتال في اليمن ما زلنا نؤكد على ضرورة إيجاد آلية مساءلة دولية وتحقيق في انتهاكات حقوق الإنسان في اليمن. بداية أنا توفيق الحميدي، رئيس منظمة سام الحقوق والحريات، محامي سابق في اليمن وحاليا أعيش في النمسا. تنشط منظمتنا في مجال حقوق الإنسان في اليمن، تقوم بعملية رصد وتوثيق ومساءلة للانتهاكات منذ عام 2017 حتى اليوم. أصدرنا ما يقارب 53 تقريرا حقوقيا موسعا شمل كافة الانتهاكات الموجودة في اليمن. بعض هذه الأنشطة خاصة المتعلقة بالاعتقالات التعسفية، بالإخفاءات القسرية، بالمحاكمات الغير عادلة، نفذناها بالشراكة مع منظمة ديتي جلوبال أو ديتي انستيتيوت. وبالتالي ربما الوضع في اليمن لا يخفى عليكم، وباعتقادي أغلب أعضاء الدول اطلعوا على التقارير التي صدرت بالفترة من عام 2016 إلى 2020 الصادرة من فريق الخبراء البارزين، قبل أن يتوقف هذا الفريق عن ممارسة دوره على الأرض بسبب عدم حصوله على التمديد والأصوات الكافية للاستمرار في اليمن. اليوم في حقيقة الأمر أنا طرحت هذا التساؤل اليوم بعد 10 سنوات من الحرب، لماذا ما زلنا نحن وكثير من منظمات المجتمع المدني اليمني والخارجي تؤكد على الاهتمام الدولي خلال فترة الخبراء البارزين كانت تتصدر المشهد الحقوقي وتتصدر المشهد الإعلامي.
We lost the translation a little while ago, about 2 minutes ago. Okay. Yes, thank you.
كان الذي يدعونا إلى المطالبة بلجنة أو بآلية تحقيق دولية من أجل إعادة اليمن إلى الواجهة، إعادة الفترة التي الإنسان على حد سواء. كان هنالك تواصل، هنالك تحفز من الضحايا للالتقاء بفريق الخبراء ووضع قضاياهم. كان شعر الناس بأن اليمن تركت لقدرها، وبالتالي لم يجدوا أي اهتمام ولم يجدوا آلية معينة للتواصل معها لإيصال مجلس حقوق الإنسان. لكن كان فريق الخبراء يمنح نوع من الثقة ونوع من الطمأنينة للضحايا لطرح قضاياهم بصورة مستمرة. مرحلة أعلى منها، بمعنى الانتهاكات في اليمن منذ اللحظة الأولى هنالك انتهاكات جسيمة متعلقة بالقصف العشوائي التي تحدثنا عنها تطورت. أصبحت الحرب اليمنية ليست حربا داخلية، أصبحت حرب إقليمية. واليوم وبالتالي الآليات المحلية اليوم غير قادرة على أن تستوعب كل هذه الانتهاكات. هذا الأمر اليوم يتطلب من المجتمع الدولي أن يكون يرصد مثل كل هذه الانتهاكات التي تحدثنا عنها. أيضا من الأسباب وجود أطراف خارجية اليوم مدعومة بأطراف خارجية، وبالتالي هذا الأمر يعقد المشهد على المنظمات المحلية. هذا المشهد الذي بينته بوست من قبل أجهزة عسكرية مدعومة من طرف ما. نتحدث في حضرموت عن مداهمة منزل لصحفي لأنه اعتقل من قبل وناشطين خرجوا للاحتفال بالثورة اليمنية. أو نتحدث عن العاملين في المنظمات الإنسانية والمنظمات الأممية المعتقلين الدعم وجهد خارجي من قبل مجلس حقوق الإنسان، من قبل الدول، للعمل على وجود آلية دولية، وأيضا تقديم مهم أنه نذكر أن المنظمات اليمنية بذلت جهدا جبارا حتى هذه اللحظة. كثير من الانتهاكات تم الكشف عنها منزله قسرا، البعض يعيش اليوم خارج البلد، البعض تم اعتقاله لسنوات طويلة، ونحن نذكر قضية الصحفيين الذين اعتقلوا تم قنصهم ووفاتهم في الميدان. هذا الأمر برغم كل هذا الجهد ما زالت منظمات المجتمع اليمني بحاجة لدعم مواصفات وحرفية عليا، خاصة الانتهاكات التي يتم رصدها من خلال المصادر المفتوحة، وهي اليوم مصادر موثوقة موجودة لدى المنظمات المجتمع المدني اليمني. وهذا الأمر كما قلنا يتطلع، هذا العجز يجب أن يسد من خلال لجنة دولية أو آلية بشكل عام. هنالك انتهاكات في اليمن لم تتوقف. صحيح أن فترة الهدنة الأخيرة الخطاب الديني، واليوم هنالك مدارس للأسف الشديد تحولت إلى ثكنات عسكرية تحت سيطرة جماعة الحوثي باسم القتال أو تحرير فلسطين إلى غير ذلك. ما زالت القيود على النساء اليوم قائمة، وعدم القدرة على التنقل من مكان إلى آخر. ما زال هنالك المنظمات تواجه تحديات كبيرة مثل تجديد الترخيص سواء في صنعاء أو في عدن أو حتى في مأرب، أو هنالك تعميمات جديدة بضرورة إخبار السلطات الأمر الواقع عن أي نشاط تقوم به منظمة من منظمات المجتمع المدني من أجل الحصول على إذن لقيام مثل هذا النشاط. وهذا الأمر يعرض بشكل عام الناشطين للخطر، لأننا لا نعيش في اليمن في بيئة آمنة. هنالك حالة انقسام، هنالك سيطرة متعددة على الأرض، وهنالك سجون خاصة في المعسكرات، سجون خاصة لدى النافذين، وبالتالي أحيانا يصعب معرفة اعتقال الناشط أو الراصد أو الصحفي إلا بعد شهرين 3 4 أشهر. نحن عندما أصدرنا تقرير سنوات الجحيم والذي تحدث عن التعذيب في اليمن، البعض كان لا يكشف عن مصيره إلا بعد 9 أشهر، بعد أن يتنقل ما بين 4 إلى 5 إلى 6 سجون. بعض هذه السجون تكون عبارة عن كهوف في الجبال، يعني يتعرض فيه الصحفي أو الناشط أو المعارض لانتهاكات جسيمة. بشكل عام نحن اليوم نطرح هذه المبررات وهذه التحديات ليكون المجتمع الدولي ومندوبي الدول على اطلاع كامل بما يحدث في اليمن، وعلى مبرراتنا للمطالبة بوجود آلية تحقيق دولية. اليوم اليمن يحتاج إلى الدعم الداخلي من أجل تعزيز دور المنظمات المحلية الموجودة على الأرض، والتي ستتكامل بصورة أو بأخرى مع أي آلية تحقيق دولية من أجل نضمن إنهاء سياسة الإفلات من العقاب، ونضمن عملية الردع. لأنه غالبا الأطراف السياسية والتي تسيطر على الأرض عندما يكون الأمر متعلق بلجنة تحقيق دولية أو تقرير دولي سيعرض أمام مجلس الأمن ويناقش من قبل الدول، هذا يشكل رادع أكبر من التقارير غالبا التي تصدر من منظمات محلية. وأنا على اطلاع كيف يتم تداول التقارير التي كانت تصدر من فريق الخبراء البارزين أو حتى من لجنة التحقيق التابعة لمجلس الأمن التي أصدرت تقريرها مؤخرا قبل شهر عن الانتهاكات الموجودة في اليمن. يتم الاحتفاء به وتسليط الضوء عليه من قبل الإعلام اليمني بصورة مكثفة وكبيرة، ما يؤكد على أهمية الدور الذي يلعبه المجتمع الدولي في اليمن. ختاما، أنا لا أريد أن أطيل كثيرا، أنا ذكرت هذه المبررات وهي تحتاج إلى نقاش أكبر، لكن بشكل عام نحن مرة ثانية نؤكد على ضرورة إعادة وتفعيل آلية تحقيق دولية في اليمن بصورة ما، سواء الصورة الأولى أو صورة متطورة أو صورة مشتركة. دعم مكتب المفوض السامي في اليمن، تقديم الدعم الفني والمالي للمنظمات الحقوقية الموجودة في المحلية الموجودة في اليمن، والعمل على رفع دورها أو على رفع إمكانياتها المالية والفنية بحيث تكون قادرة على أن تقدم تقارير تتسم بالحرفية والمهنية والموثوقية. شكرا لكم في نهاية هذا الأمر. وأريد أن أقول إذا تأخر التحرك لم يعد لنا خيار، بل تصبح هنالك ضرورة عاجلة وعاجلة جدا. اليمنيون كشعب لم يعودوا يتحملون ما وصلوا إليه. ربما خطاب الأستاذ جميل في اليمن هو تعبير بسيط عن معاناة حقيقية. اليوم هنالك موت بسبب الجوع، وهنالك قضايا بالجملة أمام المحاكم لإخراج الناس من البيوت لعدم قدرتهم على دفع الرواتب. الوضع مأساوي على المستوى الإنساني وعلى المستوى الحقوقي. شكرا لكم مرة ثانية والسلام عليكم.
Thank you, Tawfik. Yeah, I don't know what to say to follow that on. I mean, you've given a broad overview of the situation and the challenges that remain. I'm now going to turn to Mayssa Achek from the Cairo Institute, who's going to give us an outline of what can perhaps be done here at the Human Rights Council using the various tools and methods available. Mayssa, please.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Sorry. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Tawfik. Thank you, Bonyan, for these very, very important testimonies. And thank you for being here today and demonstrating interest in the human rights cycle and the human rights violations in Yemen, a country that is no longer on the agenda each session, but the situation requires attention every session to the situation. After years of war, Yemen remains trapped in a cycle of violence and suffering. The conflict between governmental and non-governmental forces have pushed the country to the brink with no resolution in sight. Meanwhile, the economic collapse, the human rights abuses, and the deterioration of the human rights situations has left millions in despair. The blockade and the economic restrictions continue to strangle Yemen's population, depriving them of basic necessities, as Tawfik was mentioning. People are unable to even pay rent for their houses. Yet, despite this undeniable scale of the crisis, and as Bonyan also stressed in her intervention, international attention is fading and donor support is decreasing in Yemen. But beyond the battlefield, the human rights situation in Yemen is deteriorating at an alarming rate. In the recent month, the de facto authorities, the Houthis in Sana'a, have launched an unprecedented crackdown on civil society, arbitrarily detaining many of the NGO workers, the embassy staff, and UN personnel under fabricated charges of espionage. Many remain forcibly disappeared, denied access to legal representation, or cut off from their families. And their fate remains unknown. We don't know what they are charged of, when they will be released, the length of their sentences, and any basic guarantee of a fair legal proceedings are denied. The death of the UN staff members in detention in the last weeks serves as a grim reminder of the dangers faced by those working to uphold fundamental human rights in Yemen. The death of UN personnel in custody is just a stark reminder of the risks faced by those working to uphold human rights in Yemen every day. Many more face the same fate if we don't act. The systematic repression is also part of a broader effort to dismantle independent humanitarian operation and silence dissenting voices. And the chilling effect of these arrests on civil society is undeniable. Journalists, human rights defenders, and activists continue to fear prosecution. Women especially bear the brunt of these abuses, with increasingly restrictive policies limiting their rights to movement. The de facto authorities have also imposed oppressive measures on movement, education, personal liberties, and deepening social repression. But despite these urgent threats, This council has constantly failed to take meaningful action. Since the dissolution of the Group of Eminent Experts, there has been no independent mechanism to monitor and document these violations. Instead, the Council has relied every year on an Item 10 technical assistance resolution, a tool that is important in some situations, and the situation of Yemen has yielded no real progress. Over years of technical assistance provided, we still don't have any transitional justice, no unified government, no accountability for the grave human rights abuses that were committed by all parties. Rather, we have growing restrictions on civil society in both government-controlled areas and Houthi areas. That is very important to remember. But also arbitrary arrests, a dire economic situation for all civilians, and all in all, a climate of impunity. The reliance on Item 10 resolutions have proven to be woefully inadequate. Without strong monitoring and reporting mechanisms, perpetrators continue to act in Yemen in utter impunity, knowing that they will not be held accountable, knowing that they will be supported by regional powers in perpetrating these crimes with no restrictions. Yemen has also become a forgotten crisis, neglected in diplomatic circles, while the situation on the ground worsens every day. And the lack of political will from influential states in the country to move the situation forward has paralyzed the Council's ability to respond effectively. The economic situation in Yemen only deepens the suffering. The humanitarian aid system is on the verge of collapse due to severe underfunding, leaving millions struggling to access food, medicine, and any essential services. The economic divide between government and Houthi-controlled areas continues to widen, with both sides weaponizing resources as a means of control. The government's decision also to relocate financial institutions has further fueled tensions and triggered a wave of retaliation and resulted in many arbitrary detention. The arbitrary detention of the NGO workers and the human rights workers, we condemn it as an egregious violations of human rights and an attack on the principles of humanitarian actions. But words of condemnation are not enough. The Council must take concrete steps to ensure their immediate and unconditional release. The international community has a responsibility to protect those who put their lives at risk, to provide us information and document the violations, while there is no independent international mechanism doing that. So the current situation before the Council is insufficient. We said that technical assistance without independent report or meaningful discussion on accountability remains a hollow gesture. The exclusion of an interactive dialogue on its implementation is a serious oversight, undermining transparency. We acknowledge during the last resolution the inclusion and recognition of the detention of the humanitarian workers, but that recognition still is not enough, and we still need concrete measures to demand accountability and justice. This is an urgent need an urgent call to reinstate an independent international investigative mechanism to document violations and ensure accountability for all parties responsible for crimes in Yemen. We hear from all regional groups that they are ready to support accountability in Yemen, that their foreign policies are for transitional justice and rule of law in Yemen, yet no one is willing to lead on an Item 2 or an Item 4 resolution. Simultaneously, the donor money to Yemen local actors who are doing this incredible brave work is decreasing. So the usual arguments about a liquidity crisis or not having enough money to have an independent investigative mechanism are simply unacceptable at this point, because money and the funding is always found when it comes to mere technical assistance. Also, there is a huge role that the special procedures can play. The special procedures must engage more actively in monitoring and reporting on the situation, and this Council must strengthen its engagement with civil society actors working on the ground. Without these steps, impunity will continue to thrive in the country, and the suffering of the people will only deepen, and we will reach an unsolvable situation. we urge this council, like every session, to act decisively, to move beyond health measures, to take the steps necessary to confront Yemen's human rights crisis with the urgency it needs and resolve its demands. And we have to always remember, without accountability, there can never be lasting peace in Yemen. Thank you.
Thank you for those powerful words, Mayssa, and for the call to reinstate international accountability. I think everybody on the podium and all the speakers would echo that.